Perhaps he's standing. And Sandy Simon. We're also pleased to have with us members of our team, and that is Beth Jansen, our Chief Financial Officer, Ben Lang, our Secretary and Chief Scientific Officer, Judy Mara, our fearless CIO, Debbie Bailey, our Director of Investor Relations, John Shearman, Mei-Lin Wang, Janice Maraglia, who runs our government military operations, along with Bob McDowell, Katie Palomar, Larry Kick, who runs HR, Jesse Hayward, John Davis, Tom Ackerman, Barbara Gallagher, Mike Provenzano, Lee Hechtel. I think that's all of us. Now, would anyone else like to stand? Okay. We also have with us Richard Cook of Markham, our independent certified accountants. Richard? There he is. And Merrill Cranes, our attorney. And now the meeting will please come to order. John Holeva, a representative of Broadridge Financial Solutions, will serve as the Inspector of Elections for this meeting, with authority, among other things, to receive and determine the validity of all proxies and ballots submitted and to certify the number of shares represented at this meeting and the results of the vote of the company's stockholders on any motion. Ms. Debbie Bailey will act as Secretary of the meeting, to whom I now turn over the floor.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Holloway has taken and signed an oath to faithfully execute the duties of the Inspector of Elections with strict impartiality and according to the best of his ability. The floor recognizes Mr. Holloway.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I present the affidavit of Broadridge Financial Solutions, the company's mailing and tabulating agent, with respect to the due mailing of the notice of internet availability of proxy materials to stockholders of the company, as well as the due mailing of the notice of the name, the proxy statement, and the form of proxy to those stockholders requesting it. I also present a list of the holders of the company's common stock as of the close of business on 17 April 2015. Record date for this meeting, as prepared by American Stock Transfer and Trust.
The affidavits, proxy materials, and list of stockholders are directed to be filed with the records of the company. If they have not already done so, is there anybody here that wants to vote? So I can see. So a quorum is therefore present and the meeting is properly constituted for the transaction of business. The proxies and any substitutions of proxies presented to the meeting are hereby ordered filed with the records of the company. As set forth in the notice sent to each of the stockholders of the company, the business of this meeting includes the election of 6 persons to the board of directors of the company as presented in proposal number 1 in the proxy statement. The approval of an amendment to the 2005 incentive stock plan to increase the number of shares of common stock issuable thereunder to 8,333,333 and extend the expiration date thereof to January 25th, 2025 as presented in proposal 2 of the proxy statement, and the ratification of the appointment of Markham LLP as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2015, as presented in proposal number 3 in the proxy statement. Okay, so the polls are now closed with respect to the proposals. Mr. Holloway, would you please report on the votes taken with respect to proposal number 1, the election of the directors of the company?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like to advise the meeting that with respect to proposal number 1, Debbie Bailey, as appointed in the official proxy card, has voted in accordance with the proxies received from stockholders. I report that the nominees who received the highest number of affirmative votes of the shares present in person or represented by proxy and entitled to vote, a quorum being present, are James A. Hayward, John Bitzer III, Joseph Sikora, Charles Ryan, Jakob Shamash, and Sanford R. Simon.
Misters Hayward, Bitzer, Chicoli, Ryan, Shamash, and Simon have each been elected as directors of the company. Mr. Hollowell, would you please report on the vote taken with respect to proposal number 2, the approval of an amendment to the 2005 incentive stock plan to increase the number of shares of common stock issuable thereunder to 8,333,333 and extend the expiration date thereof to January 25th, 2020.
I would like to advise the meeting that Ms. Bailey has voted in accordance with the proxies received from the stockholders. 7,479,950 votes have been cast in favor of proposal number 2. 720,076 votes have been cast against it, and 77,471 votes have abstained. With respect to proposal number 2, a majority of the outstanding shares of common stock present in person or represented by proxy at the annual meeting has been cast in favor of the proposal and the amendment to the 2005 incentive stock plan to increase the number of shares of common stock issuable thereunder to 8,333,333 and extend the expiration date thereof to January 25th, 2025. Is hereby approved.
Proposal number 2 is adopted. Mr. Hollowell, would you please report on the vote taken with respect to proposal number 3, the ratification of the appointment of Markham LLP as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2015?
I would like to advise the meeting that Ms. Bailey has voted in accordance with the proxies received from the stockholders. 16,293,101 votes have been cast in favor of proposal number 3. 260,631 votes have been cast against it, and 101,624 votes have abstained. With respect to proposal number 3, a majority of the outstanding shares of common stock present or represented at the meeting has been cast in favor of the proposal, and the board of directors selection of Markham LLP is hereby ratified.
Thank you. Proposal number 3 is adopted, and I will now return the floor to Dr. Hayward.
Thank you both. The chair will now entertain a motion for the adjournment of the meeting. Would someone like to so move?
So moved.
Thank you. And would someone like to second the motion?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify their assent by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The meeting is now officially adjourned. Well, thank you very much for listening to the formalities of the meeting. And now begins what is for me the fun part, and hopefully is interactive as well. I hope you've enjoyed the demonstrations that our team put around the room. The idea is to get you closer to the products we sell, help you understand our business process more fully, and actually get to meet some of the people who are responsible for the movement and progression of the company. So this year, we have a tagline above, which is actually our brand promise, which we like very much. It's called "We Keep Life Real and Safe." And I think it captures in a nutshell exactly what the goals of the company are, in fact. And it lays out the reason why the company can do good and well simultaneously. And we keep that in mind as we recruit customers and as we decide on projects. And some of the other images are typical of some of the things we will be presenting today. So here with our safe harbor statement, which is a bit of an irony because so many of our customers really have no safe harbor. And they are pursued, their products pursued in counterfeiting, their products are detoured off their intended supply chain. And the irony is that we provide them that safe harbor. Now, just to review very, very quickly the votings that took place today. This is kind of a graphic rendering of the numbers you just heard, but it shows that overwhelmingly the outcome of each of the three issues was voted for by the great majority of the investors. So all of our current directors have been nominated by the board, and over 90%, 99% of the shares voted for the election of our directors. The amendment of our 2005 incentive stock option plan was in fact approved, and again, well over 90% of the shares voted. And this incentive stock plan will allow us to offer equity-based compensation to all of our employees. And finally, the ratification of our auditors. Again, over 97% of the shares voted. And Marcon LLP will audit our consolidated financial statements again for this fiscal year. Okay, so back to our business and what we do. A large focus in the earliest days of our company was focused on counterfeiting before we realized that counterfeiting is really symptomatic of a leaky supply chain. And we focused our effort instead on securing those supply chains and then consequently protecting brands and customers and consumers against counterfeits. But we're also heavily involved in law enforcement and in relating criminals to their crimes and in the efforts to return stolen material to their original owners. Now, we're proud of our recent financial history, and the numbers largely speak for themselves. For our first quarter, for the first time, we broke through the $1 million glass window with 108% increase over the quarter from the prior year, and a 92% increase over the immediate prior quarter. And it led to our debt-free balance sheet, which keeps the company in very good shape. In fiscal 2, the trend continued, and for the first time, we broke through 1.5 million, with 138% increase over the prior year. But more importantly, our operating expenses were significantly diminished due to a consolidated effort to control our expenses during that time. And the year-to-date adjusted EBITDA of a negative 2.9 million versus a negative 5 million in the prior year represents a decrease of 2.1 million or 42%. So we're decreasing our expenses while increasing our revenue, which is just the right direction you'd like to see us go in, I hope. And we have no reason to suspect that this direction will not be sustained. As you know, we provide no guidance. We don't have the legal basis to do so. But the trend in general is running quite well. Thanks to our uplisting, we now have a list which is growing. There are some who've expressed interest beyond these analysts. We have a list of analysts who are following the company quite closely. and who have an effect on the investment community quite clearly. And you can see they're somewhat varied in their opinion, but overall, they have an inspirational target for our share price. If you contemplate our accomplishments of this past year, mimicking the way we spoke last year, I reviewed these same issues for you last year. So we completed our uplisting. We did our 2 raises in November and April. And now we're in a position to have a runway of at least 5 quarters. And you must realize that as part of the management team of Applied DNA, we've never had a 5-quarter runway. It's always been much shorter than that. So that a large percentage of our effort was to ensure that ultimately we'd have the steady funding. Now it's a great position to find ourselves able to focus like a laser on the business at hand and develop that business instead of being concerned about the next round of financing. So that's excellent. We have introduced DNAnet home asset marking in the United States. We launched it initially in Europe, where it had a wonderful reception both in London and in Sweden and in Copenhagen. And as you should have seen in some recent press releases, the response in the US has also been quite strong. And I can tell you beyond that, that interest from many municipalities is in the process of being developed. We announced today a very important agreement, which I'll get to again in a moment, and that is with Louis Dreyfus Commodities. Louis Dreyfus is one of these largest companies you may never have heard of outside of the comedian from the Jerry Seinfeld show. So Louis Dreyfus is a commodities moving company that moves most of the world's commodities and is responsible for the movement of up to 80% of the world's global cotton reserves. So a very important ally for us, with whom we see lots of crosstalk and interaction. We also entered into a licensing agreement with Divatex to commercialize the first supply of DNA-marked Pima cotton. And that's led to the creation of a brand, actually 2 brands, that we co-own, Pima Cotton and Homegrown. Amazingly, Homegrown was available from the Trade Market Office. And Pima Cotton and Homegrown will add to the revenue that we'll see from the cotton industry, because it allows us to actually license those brands to our branded customers, to our retailers as well. So it adds another dimension to the kind of revenue that we'll see. And you'll see the revenue from cotton is multifaceted. And so to have our own brand is a great supplement. We also, the brass ring for companies that are involved in proving authenticity is to be able to prove that authenticity forensically in the field. And now we're amongst the first with our on-site testing method that allows us to forensically identify both our signature DNA mark and sometimes the residual DNA that may be present in a highly fragmented way that's normally very difficult to find, but we specialize in this effort. Highly fragmented DNA that is present in highly processed natural commodities. So you can imagine cotton going from the cotton field to the finished product. Between the bleaching, the oxidizing, the high heat, the exposure to dyes and chemicals and minerals, the cotton itself goes through enormous abuse, as does the DNA inside the cotton, and it's highly, highly fragmented. And it's very difficult to develop those skill sets to be able to detect them and detect them routinely. And we have commoditized the genotyping assay that allows us to do that, and now developed the device that allows us to do that on site with a series of customers. And as you'll see, we can do that at every node in the supply chain. We've also demonstrated, you may have seen it around the room, a multimodal in-field detection system, which is essentially a 1-second optical assay, highly secure because of the high resolution. We've announced that we're compliant as judged by perhaps the singular person in the United States best qualified to make that judgment with the FDA's guidelines for marking prescription drugs. So now we can actually mark with our DNA not just the packaging, but the actual unit doses themselves, and those unit doses can be verified using forensic methods on site. We've launched a very creative optical method for instant recognition called Beacon, and that is an encrypted fluorophore that you cannot see under conventional UV light. But exposure to a wipe with a chemical reagent in it, it's an instantaneous reaction, and now the fluorophore is decrypted, and now you can see it. And that characterizes a very secure kind of optical system. And then finally, our MilGov group signed with a 4th federal agency in record time. And that record time is also kind of characteristic of the shortening of our sales cycle. All good news indeed. So 1 month this was from the first coffee in Starbucks to our first signed purchase order. And here are just some images of our multimodal reader, which is ready for alpha deployment. It operates, as the name implies, in multi-modes, including image analysis as well as optical analysis. And it compares the analytical properties of the spectra to those in a cloud database. So it's very precise, very fast, and has great utility in screening, especially in large production scenarios. And we expect that to be in the hands of our alpha test partners by mid to late summer. So that's very exciting. That's also been one of the important goals, not only for the company, but for the Department of Defense, who've been very anxious to have such a method. So now what do we do? What's the direction we have to go in to ensure that we stay on the same slope you saw in those first 2 quarterly reviews, or better, as you'll see in a moment? We need to increase the size and number of our contracts. In the past, our contracts have been smaller, larger number, but what we're signing now are larger multi-year contracts, which come with the forecastability that a young company never has. And as a public young company, the pressure is on us constantly to be able to say something about where we're going. And with larger, longer contracts, that's great. We need to focus on our most successful verticals. Our success in the military, our success in textiles, our success in DNA net and home asset marking. We need to enter new markets that are clamoring for us. I just returned from Europe, and the response from the European pharmaceutical companies to our platform was breathtaking. And so we need to pursue that industry where we can add real value, save morbidity and mortality on multiple continents, and we're most anxious to enter that market with Gusto, and we have several partnerships underway already. We are continuing to shift more of the burden for development to all of our customers. And we took that on in the early days when our sales cycle was longer and we needed to develop the credibility, but we've done that so well in so many markets that now we're in a very strong position to demand payment for development as well as for supply. And we need to continue to tightly manage our costs so that we cross the barrier to profitability as quickly as possible. Now, our patent portfolio as a biotech company working in high technology is one of the core value developers for the company. And you can see since we last met, when we were here last year, we cited 24 issued or 23 issued patents, 31 patents pending, and those numbers have increased significantly. We've also structured the way we manage our patents and added an in-house attorney who is helping us do that, managing our IP, so that that becomes a much more marketable portfolio. And we see a future where our IP becomes a dynamic asset, both licensing in and licensing out. This really is a representation of our core. And we call it our technical ecology. And it relates to what we can do with all of our customers. And at the core of that technology, of course, is signature DNA to provide the forensic evidence. And wrapped around that is a rapid screening platform using an optical marker. And the capacity to read that optical marker in the field, and the capacity to forensically read in the field the DNA marker. So in combination, you have a very effective program. You can screen at high speed for our mark, and then you can authenticate the DNA at a forensic level. Then, of course, the value of lab authentication is that in court cases, for example, when the police submit evidence to us, which they do virtually every week, our forensic scientists, who are all members of the American Academy of Forensic Examiners, produce an expert witness document. And that expert witness document is an essential asset if a case is going to be brought to court. And then finally, our digital DNA asset, which is an IT version of our DNA content and allows us to track and trace in combination with authenticity. And we believe we're the only company who can integrate all of those. Now, just a little bit market by market, and I'll try to show you the direction we feel we're going as a consequence of those markets. So in our military and government markets, we actually have one more partner who's not listed there because we can't name them. But we're working right now with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Missile Defense Agency. We collaborate closely with the Logistics Management Institute and with number 4. Now, what's remarkable is the evolution of our revenue in that sector. And our early trials were to establish the credibility of the company. They did not yield much revenue. But those trials stayed very much on a lineal course and grew substantially, but linearly. And now we're at a stage in our company where our revenues are still small, but quite capable of growing as a step function. And that's just what's happened here in the Middle Gulf area, where we've grown by a step function, essentially doubling the prior year's revenue. Now this is what we expect to happen in multiple sectors. In the sectors you're seeing our press releases focusing, in home asset marketing, in textiles, etc. And so in combination, our growth rate should not stay on that linear slope in the future, but should demonstrate step function increases when we enjoy larger commitments to larger customers. But that's an important model because we truly think it will affect a lot of what we're telling you subsequently. So another area for us is industrial materials, and these are very relevant to the military, but just as relevant for our capacity to go from the military to commercial off-the-counter business. And that includes very large markets like plastics, 3D printing, copper marking, wire marking, silicone, fastener markings, etc. We've begun marking automobiles, a very exciting entry for us in this past year, and with some premium brands, and mostly marking these vehicles as they are imported into Scandinavia from other portions of Europe. And those DNA marks mark the car in multiple places, and the concept is that we want to deter the criminal. There's also a badge on every car that says, warning, this has been DNA marked. We want to deter the criminal so that the criminal realizes that if they remove the navigation system, that navigation system can be tracked back via the mark. And the mark has encrypted in it the vehicle identification number and the name of the owner. So what that also allows is that the police property rooms, which become jam-packed with these materials that never get returned, now have a mechanism to be returned to the original owner and to serve as evidence in the prosecution of the case. And what we hear from the insurers who have been bringing us these programs is that they have an uncanny level of deterrence, up to and over 80% compared to the non-marked vehicles. So we're very excited about this because it's a harbinger of business we can do with insurance companies, business we can do with automobile manufacturers, not just at the place of import, but during their manufacture, and perhaps most importantly, in replacement parts, which is where counterfeit automotive components run into the most trouble. We've announced our progress in pharma, and that's also led us to trials with a large pharmaceutical company, one of the world's largest right now, in Asia. The trial is being conducted. It's brought us into an involvement in the personal care industry as well, and those industries that use herbal extracts and materials. We have a strong interest in helping to impose a higher level of quality on those industries using DNA-based methods so that the product that they produce is better assured, A, to have come from its origins, as they've stated, and B, to have the efficacy that they claim. And just yesterday, we announced an affiliation with a marijuana dispensary. Now this is one of those industries just being birthed in which controls have not really been well thought out. but in which DNA provides the kind of resolution and the fidelity necessary to be able to track extracts back to their original source. Now we feel that, for example, unlike much of the herbal extract industry, the dispensary of marijuana has shown great promise for the treatment of recalcitrant seizures in young children, and these are often elixirs, as it were, that contain almost no THC level. So their impact on the functioning of the child is de minimis, but they seem to have a remarkable impact on things like seizures. And we'd love to be part of social change in that regard, and simultaneously providing absolute assurance of safety. And of course, our cotton industry, and I'll spend just a few minutes before ending on the cotton industry, because it gives you the best example, I think, of the kind of impact that we can have on supply chains in virtually any industry. And we have multiple partners throughout that industry. We announced just yesterday our association with Lewis Dreyfus Commodities. That's a very large $64 billion company. Those companies typically trade at very low gross margins, sometimes only 2 to 4%. So it means that the risk that they're exposed to, should they be transporting inauthentic product, or worse yet, counterfeit product, that the investment they've had to make to garner that low level of margin is now put completely at risk, and it has continued harmonic damage. So our technology offers a great way of helping companies like Lewis Dreyfus Commodities ensure that what they're shipping is truly what their customers claim they're shipping, and that what they're delivering is appropriate in that regard as well. And our relationship is first focused on the issue of cotton, where for 30 years the industry has been cheated, the consumers have been cheated. Our evidence is that in that 30 years, the use of Pima cotton has never reached its full potential because of cheating by adding a much cheaper upland cotton in order to lower the cost of manufacture and increase the margin for the offshore manufacturers. We in fact have proved that and got along to Asia to prove to those contract manufacturers that their cheating would be detected, and to implement new systems that will for the first time be bringing verified 100% Pima cotton back into the United States and back to a retail and consumer industry. And just to show you a little bit of how that works, the supply chain is quite complicated, and we can utilize DNA at every stage of that supply chain. We start by DNA marking at the very top of the supply chain. That is when the cotton is ginned in the gin mill. We mark virtually every fiber, and then every fiber is capable of being tested throughout the completion of finished product, and most of that work, of course, takes place offshore. I mentioned that we branded Pimacot along with Divatex, and this is really becoming the new global standard for DNA-assured Pima fiber. And if you wanted to assure yourselves that the fiber was grown in the United States, and there are companies like Walmart, for example, that are dedicating $250 billion to the proof of American origin and to bringing American jobs back onto American soil. And what better way to prove that the finished product was made with an American-made fiber, then by marking that fiber with the DNA that so signifies from the very beginning and tracking it throughout. That's just what we do. Every single node in the supply chain, the DNA is verified before it's allowed to ship or change hands. And quality is assured at every single step of the way. We generate revenue by DNA marking the fiber itself, by providing the on-site instruments that are capable of verifying those fibers, and by providing the kits in kind of what's known as the Gillette model, the razor blade model. We provide the reactive kits that give you the absolute assurance that the product is genuine. Excuse me. And then we, with our digital DNA product, connect the consumer or anyone in the distal supply chain to the very top of the supply chain. So it's exactly analogous to the farm-to-table notion that's been so attractive in American culture. This is really fiber to garment. And the consumer can actually see the farmer who grew their fiber, the family who grew their fiber, and where it was located. And there is our Pima Cop bales just leaving Pacific Gym in Fresno before heading out to California. The last topic I'll talk about is the propagation of DNA net for the marking of home assets. This is a potentially huge market. We began here in Suffolk County with the approval of the Suffolk County Legislature to run a pilot in the town of Huntington Station. We began with a single municipality, but our business model is to extend beyond municipalities, to exchanges, to large enterprises, to homeowners associations, and to smaller groups as well. But to bring it very much to both business to consumer and the B2B model. And just yesterday as well, we announced the successful launch of home asset marking in a new group of municipalities in New Jersey. So just to reiterate, we've grown nice and steadily on a reliable, sloped course. Our acceptance has grown high. Our credibility is accepted in the marketplace. And now we stand a chance to grow by a step function as we did in our no-gov business. We expect the same credibility and reception taking place in textiles, in other industries like home asset marking, to demonstrate the same rate of growth. So that we're looking forward to a phase of continued growth and to approaching our conversion to profitability just as soon as we can. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Why is pharmaceuticals so slow to sign on when they are so painful? I mean, they're here and they're, in front of us. I mean, I remember it's one of the chiefs of one of the big companies, and I don't get it.
Yeah, in fact, we just visited with the pharmaceutical executive who was and in this market, the population suffers 700,000 deaths per year from counterfeit products.
He told me, I'm interrupting you, that they have just rooms. He said, we cannot believe the litigation that we have pending just because of that. He said,
But we have, we believe, the perfect solution because our product already fits with FDA guidelines. We actually have an application underway for GRAS status, which is generally recognized as safe, which means that any drug manufacturer can utilize our DNA marks without the prior approval of FDA and take it to market. So it does not have to be listed on the ingredient list. It's considered a safe excipient, it's called, but because it's used at parts per billion or parts per trillion, it does not have to be listed. So we're hopeful that this is an industry that's just perfect for us. It achieves the kinds of goals that we like to do. We like the notion of pursuing opportunities in Africa because it seems to be the world suffers the most there. And I don't think it will be as slow as we might expect, because it's not like we have to pass clinical trials. We don't have to prove that our product does not affect bioavailability or efficacy. We don't have to prove toxicity. And that is because the FDA had years ago issued standards for what the level of DNA could be as a contaminant, not as a willful ingredient, but as a contaminant in prescription drugs. And those levels are often somewhere between 10,000 and 1 million times higher than the DNA that we use. So I'm hopeful that you'll see us move into that industry as fast as we can make it happen.
So it's a no, I mean, but why? I mean, it's a silly question, but why have they not jumped on that?
Well, they're just learning about it.
So it's they are unaware of your or our.
Yeah, so they're just climbing the learning curve. And remember, I mentioned we are already in product.
Two questions, actually. The first one is with the medical marijuana dispenser. It says it's a pre-application agreement. How long does the application process approximately take before we'll know whether or not it's going?
Yes, I think in New York State, anybody in my team correct me if I'm wrong, I think in New York State the decision will be made until close to the end of this year.
And my second question is, with that slide you showed the big increase in contracts and revenue on the government agencies. I noticed the defense launch agency was down.
Yes.
What happened there?
Sure. We have a very close relationship with DI. They are the procurement arm for all of DoD. And what we had done was develop individualized relationships, more than 32 contracts, with individual manufacturers when we were marking at all of those locations. It became much more sensible, both in terms of our time and labor, and the expense that DLA had to pay to consolidate that in Columbus, Ohio. So that's exactly what we've done. At the same time, our Missile Defense Agency contract calls for, over the course of the 2 years that contract is relevant, and we're about 9 months in, for us to increase the number of relationships we have from 32 to over 100. So, in fact, I think that's a transient change. It's a almost welcome change because the pain level per dollar has diminished a whole lot. We have to interact with many fewer companies. It's much more efficient. And now it's an opportunity to stay focused and grow.
Dr. Hayward, congratulations on a great year to you, your board, your management team. Two questions. One, what's changed on your pilot programs in the past year that's driving revenue? And the second thing, some of us who remember the 80s or hear them, remember the beginning of the barcode, great little company on Long Island called Single Technology. Could you explore some of the analogies that you're seeing in some of your new employees?
Sure. Well, with regard to your latter question, and symbol, we are in many ways analogous to where symbol was in its early development phase. we have a technology that is relevant to at least 10 or 15% of global trade. That's an enormous number. And that number has been stated to us by thought leaders around the world when they review our platform. So they really think that we stand a chance of being taken up at the same rate at which barcoding was taken up. In other ways, our solutions are a lot simpler because DNA can be incorporated into manufacturing trains that it can be done very simply with no perturbation of the way things are currently manufactured. In other words, DNA is pretty much agnostic to form and function when it comes to manufacturing a product. What was the first part of the question?
The first question on the pipeline, what's happened in the past year?
Sure, you asked it about our pilots. Well, first of all, our pilots now are funded pilots for the most part. And in our prior history, pilots were very much not. Secondly, our pilots are shorter, and we tend to be given pilots from very large companies. Companies that are in the Fortune 100s in many cases, that as they convert to commercialization would lead to double-digit millions of income if we make that conversion. So they're very exciting, and we know a lot more than we did a few years back.
I want to thank you very much for your dream. You got a beautiful product, and now you have the knowledge to bring it from a dream to a reality. And I want to, it's amazing what you've done. I also want to say thank you for going public. The little guy like me can cash in on your kind of success that you've already demonstrated, and I think it's going to be amazing in the future. Second, this is a little question, and it's about your sales force. Are you increasing it? What is your sales force looking like, and what do you envision it being in a year or two?
Okay, well, first of all, I can't thank you enough for your comments. They're very meaningful to us, but I have to tell you, what we have is a dream team. And we have people who are committed. I have to chase them out of the building at 10 o'clock at night. This morning they were in at 6 o'clock in the morning. Over on the weekends, if I ask a question, I get it answered via email or text in seconds. So frankly, it's never been my pleasure to work with anyone who's been this responsive, this dedicated, and put so much on the line because they believe that what we can do can be so impactful on mankind. So that was great comment. And the
Sales force?
Yeah, the sales force. So we are steadily growing our sales force. We are just now looking at increasing our sales force in Europe. We have increased our sales force recently in the United States in the form of packaging and printing. And we're looking at an increase to accommodate personal care in pharma. But what we are also doing is developing sales channels just as aggressively. So a proper approach to selling for us at this stage is a good mix of sales channels that can be tightly managed from the inside, external sales channels tightly managed from the inside, and experienced, aggressive, energetic salespeople from the inside. And we certainly have both.
I have one last question, comment, and encouragement, okay? Because I believe you've got from source to manufacturer to distributor to retail. The last equation is consumer, me. If you can, and I'm sure you've dreamt of this and you want to do it, a little flashlight on my keychain that I can go to any product that the manufacturer says I authenticated this, and I can authenticate it at point of sale, and a little green light comes on and says, this is it. or a little red light comes on and says, this isn't it, I will pay you to have that device in my pocket. And every manufacturer who is legitimate will want to make sure that their little mark is on their little product, no matter what it is, where it is, when it is. And this company will be off the charts when I, the consumer, I've already named it, consumer authentication device. Please, dream it, do it, and it's going to change the world, because every consumer will want to go and say, this is it.
Well, we do in fact have that product. We call it digital DNA. And it is a product that combines IT with DNA. And the lady who's sitting just off your left shoulder is the woman who runs that project.
Well, how big is it? I mean, can I carry it in my pocket? Can I throw
It uses a smartphone application, and it uses about a 1 inch by 1 inch square printed as a QR code
I'd love to see
onto
that.
anything.
I'm going to go buy more stock of you guys.
We have it here, and we have stock certificates.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
You talked about expansion plans in employee area and I guess manufacturing. Are you restricted physically? That is, you need more space to do this physical expansion. Are you looking for space? You need it? Is that constricting some of your plans?
At the moment, we're not space constricted. We have expansion space, and we're very close to ISO certification, probably before the end of the summer. At the same time, we hope to be certified CGMP so that we will be able to manufacture drug products. And that space will be in dedicated space within our existing building. We have a business in the UK. We expanded to a small 10 by 10 laboratory in the UK a little too early. We've closed that, but we're not far from considering opening an additional space in the UK to fund some development and manufacture over there at the same time, in part because the market is so distinct. Any other questions?
Yeah. With your increase in financial success over last year, do you have an estimate of when you expect the company to turn profitable?
Internally, we do. Externally, we're not allowed to say.
Okay.
So all we can say is we feel as though we're marching in the right direction. And if you look at the performance of our last 2 quarters, we'll have to wait and see how our 3rd quarter turns out. But what you should do, if I were in your shoes, is put those together and simply try to plot out the point at which our revenue crosses over our expenses, assuming that we continue to maintain tight control of our expenses.
Thank you.
Sure. Stan?
Could you talk a little bit about your criteria for M&A activity, David, and also, let's just leave it like that.
Sure. This is an industry which is highly fragmented, and we, in all humility, have risen to the very top as the thought leadership in that industry. We have not risen to the top of the revenue in that industry, and we're fighting hard to make sure we get there. As we become profitable and as we rise to the top of the revenue in that industry, there will be opportunities to consolidate, to eliminate competitors who aggressively price and lower the value of the marketplace, to eliminate competitors who launch frivolous lawsuits and the like. But our first and foremost goal is to manage the growth of our business organically, which we're doing very, very well, and to manage as much as we can the share price, to help grow the share price. As those 2 things happen, then we will contemplate all of our options. Okay, well, thank you all for coming very much. It's been a delight. Really appreciate the questions and your enthusiasm and above all your support.